All right, so today we're going to learn how to multiply a decimal by a multiple or power of 10. So if you're looking at this chart here, you'll see if you have 8 and 3/10, if you're multiplying it by 10, if you notice here, the decimal point, it went to the right one time. So you have 83. All right, if I'm multiplying 8 and 3/10 times 100, all right, I have two zeros. That's two groups of 10. So that means my decimal point is going to shift over 2 times to the right. All right, and we're going to put that placeholder 0. So now you have 830. So if you notice in your product, sometimes you're not going to have a decimal. You might start off with a decimal, but in your product, you won't have a decimal point. Now for 8 and 3/10, if you're multiplying it times 1,000, we have 3 zeros or 3 groups of 10. And you notice here we have 8,300. So today we're going to learn how to take the decimal point and how to shift it over based on the number of zeros that we have in the factor. So we're going to start with guided practice number 1. All right, so I'm always going to rewrite my decimal. So 5.374. All right, and I'm multiplying it times 100. So I have 2 zeros here. That means I'm going to multiply this number by 100. So I'm going to start with my decimal point, and I'm going to move my decimal point to the right, because as I'm multiplying, my digits are shifting to the left. Okay, so I'm going to go 1, 2, and it stops right here. I'm even going to list 1, 2. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite it. So it's 537 and 4/10. This is my final answer. All right, so in this lesson today, we're just taking our decimal point and we're shifting it over based on the number of zeros we have. We're always moving the decimal to the right because the numbers are going to get bigger. So I'm going to take 6 and 1300ths. I'm going to write 6 and 1300ths. All right, and I'm multiplying it by 1,000. In 1,000, we have 3 zeros. That means I'm going to take my decimal point and I'm going to move it over to the right 3 times. 1, 2, 3. This is where my decimal point stops. So I moved it over 1, 2, 3 place values. If I notice here, I have an empty place value. I have to put a 0 here in the place value. All right, so my final answer is going to be 6,130. I don't need to put a decimal point here because I don't have any parts, right? There's no decimal part, so I don't need to put the decimal here. I can just write it as a whole number. All right, now for the next one, we have this number, we're multiplying it by 1,000. So I have 1, 2, 3. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this number, 7 and 651 thousandths, and I'm multiplying it by 1,000. So I have 3 zeros here. So I have 1, 2, 3, and I'm stopping here. So I just moved my decimal point over 3 times, right? So now my answer is going to be 7,651. Okay, I don't need to put the 0 here because there's no part here. All right, so now my last one, I'm going to rewrite this number. I have 82 thousandths, and now I have 4 zeros, which means I'm going to shift it over to the right 4 times, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I stop here. There's an empty place value. I need to put a 0 here. Now, when I rewrite it, I don't need to put these zeros in the front. I can just rewrite it as a whole number, 820. Okay, so my final answer is going to be 820. So if you notice here, we had 4 zeros. I moved it over 4 times to the right. So we're just taking the decimal point and we're moving it over 4 times. All right. And now my final answer is going to be 820. So sometimes you're going to have that empty place value where you need to put that 0 in. That's going to be really important. So I'm going to do guided practice 2. All right, so now I'm going to rewrite. So I have 1 and 74 thousandths times 100. All right, so I have 2 zeros here. All right, I'm going to rewrite my number, 1 and 74 thousandths, and that means I need to move it 2 times to the right. So I'm going to start with my decimal point, and I'm going to move it over 1, 2, and I stop right here. So now my answer is going to have a decimal in there. So when I rewrite it, it's going to be 107 and 4/10. Okay, now for the next one, we have 4 73/100 times 1,000. So I have 3 zeros here. All right, I'm going to rewrite this number, 4 73/100, and I'm going to move it to the right 3 times because I have 3 zeros here. 1, 2, 3. So when I rewrite this number, it's going to be 4,730. Okay, now for the next one, I'm going to rewrite it 13 61/100. I have 3 zeros. We're multiplying by 1,000. So I am going to move it over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. There's an empty place value. I need to put a 0 there. So when I rewrite this, it's going to be 13,610. Okay. And the last one, we have 91,000. I'm going to rewrite 91,000, and I am multiplying by 1,000. So I have 3 zeros. Okay, so now I'm going to shift it over 3 times to the right. 1, 2, 3. My decimal point goes here. So when I rewrite it, I can just rewrite it as 91. I don't need to put these zeros over here. So I'm going to rewrite it and just write 91. All right, so that is how you multiply a decimal by a multiple of 10. You start with the decimal point, you count the zeros, and you just shift it over however many zeros there are. All right, so now we're going to try one more different type of example with exponents. All right, but you're going to basically be using the same strategy. So here we have 4 17/100 times 10 to the second power. Now this may look complicated, but it's actually easier because all you have to do is look at the exponent, and the exponent is going to tell you how many times you're moving the decimal point to the right. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my number 4 17/100. And if I have 10 to the second power, that means that I have 2 groups of 10. I need to move my decimal point 2 times to the right. So I'm going 1, 2, and stopping here. So when I rewrite it, my answer is going to be 417. Okay, so for the next one, I have 10 to the second power. That means I'm going to shift my decimal point to the right 2 times. So I'm going to rewrite my decimal 2 561,000, and I'm going to move it to the right 2 times. 1, 2. Okay, so now my decimal point is in between the 6 and the 1. I just moved it over 2 times to the right. Pretend you're taking your decimal point and you're just picking it up and moving it over 2 times. So now when I rewrite it, it's 256 and 1/10. Okay, so this one is going to have a decimal point in there. It doesn't have to have it, but in this case for B, it does. If you look at A, it doesn't have a decimal point. It's at the end, so we don't need to write it. So now for C, I'm going to rewrite my decimal. So I have 62 thousandths, and I'm moving it times 10 to the 4th power. So the 4, the exponent is going to tell me I need to take my decimal point and move it to the right 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm stopping right here. I could even label it on the bottom so that I keep nice and organized. There's a missing place value here. I need to put that 0 here to hold that place value. So when I'm rewriting this, I don't need to put these zeros in the front. I can just rewrite 620. So my answer would be 620. All right, and then for my last one here, I'm going to rewrite 89 5/10. All right, and I am multiplying it times 10 to the 4th power. The 4 is telling me I have to move my decimal point 4 times to the right. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm stopping right here. Now, if you notice here, we have a lot of different place values that do not have zeros. We need to make sure we're putting them in. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is a big number, but think of it. If you're multiplying 89 5/10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, you're going to have a big number. So I'm going to rewrite this, making sure that I'm copying all my zeros, 1, 2, 3, comma. All right, so my final answer would be 895,000. All right, the last set of examples we're going to do with exponents. All right, so I'm going to rewrite 7 12/100 times 10 to the second power. So that means I'm moving it over 2 times. 1, 2. Now my decimal's at the end, so I don't need to include my decimal when I rewrite it. I can just rewrite it as 712. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this number, 3 and 982 thousandths times 10 to the second power. My exponent is going to tell me how many times I'm shifting my decimal to the right. 1, 2. Now my decimal point is in between the 8 and the 2. Okay, so I'm rewriting it as 398 and 2/10. That's my final answer. So here I have 0 and 92 hundredths. Okay, and I am multiplying it by 10 to the fourth power, which means I'm going to shift my decimal point to the right 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. I could even label it to make sure that I'm keeping track. Here I have an empty place value. I have to put a 0 here. Okay, so when I rewrite it, I don't need to put the zeros in the beginning. I can just write 920. All right, here I'm going to rewrite it as 27 and 4/10 times 10 to the fourth power. The 4 is telling me I need to shift my decimal point 4 times to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I have 3 empty place values. I need to put 3 zeros for my empty place values. I'm going to rewrite it as 274,000. So when you're doing this lesson, make sure you're either counting the number of zeros, or if you have an exponent, you're just looking at the exponent, and that will tell you how many times you have to move the decimal point over. So the decimal point was here in the beginning, but then when you're moving it over, it's now over here. So if you want to like cross it out where it was before so that you don't get confused, that's another strategy that will help you. So just make sure that you're labeling your work, and make sure that you're labeling your jumps, that you're jumping to the right. So that shows how the decimal's moving. So if this is 4, I would label this to show that I moved it 4 times so that I'm not making a mistake, especially when there's going to be some missing place values to put the 0 in.